What's happening, connoisseurs? It's Rod with Pow Group. Welcome back on The Pursuit of Wealth, your home for MJ stocks, crypto assets, news, and interviews. Today is Thursday, April 3rd. Hope you're well. And in this video, we're going to do a fun one. We'll discuss what happens to MJ legalization if Canada becomes the 51st state. And I'll preface this by saying I don't think that this is going to happen. I don't think this is the most likely scenario, but I thought it would be a fun video, and I'll give my thoughts and opinions on this. The Greenland's another one that they've been talking about recently. We'll see what happens. But like I said, I would say this is probably close to less than like a 1% chance of happening. But we'll discuss what could potentially come of this. And before we do, make sure to smash the like, help support me in the channel. If you're new, you can subscribe, take the bell, all that good stuff. You'll be notified on any future videos or when I go live. And as always, this is not financial advice. This is for entertainment purposes only, and it should be very entertaining. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this. If this were to happen, how do you think it would play out? And you can also follow us over on X, formerly Twitter. Handle for that is @GroupPal. So essentially, I was thinking about this. There's tons of states, right? There's 24 states in the U.S. that are legal at the recreational level, and I think the last time I checked, there was around 38 that are legal in terms of, recreational or medical, right? So if there's 38 total in some form of legalization and 24 recreationally, if Canada became a state, it would effectively just be operating as if it were the 25th state in the U.S. to legalize, right? If Canada became the U.S. and there was 51 states, essentially there would be 25, right? But obviously, federal law would trump that, no pun intended. And we'll take a look at what Grok has to say, but that's my own thoughts and opinions, and I think that it could potentially pave the way for legalization if that were to happen in the U.S., right? But I just don't see that as the most likely scenario. So we'll see what Grok AI's take is on it. If Canada became the 51st state of the United States, the fate of MJ legalization would depend on a complex interplay of political, legal, and cultural factors. Here's a breakdown of what might happen. Federal law takes precedence. In the U.S., MJ remains illegal at the federal level under the Controlled Substances Act, but that might not be the case for very long, right? If we get even rescheduling to Schedule 3, that'll be a huge step in the right direction. There's talk about getting banking done during this term as well. Very well could happen in 2025. I think 2026, though, is the most likely scenario, but I think it has a solid chance of passing in the next year or two. And that would classify it as a Schedule 1 drug. If Canada joined, that classifies it as a Schedule 1 drug. If Canada joined the U.S. in a current nationwide legalization of recreational MJ since 2018, it would likely face immediate tension with federal law. The U.S. Constitution's Supremacy Clause means federal law would override any conflicting state or former national laws, potentially nullifying Canada's legal framework unless exceptions were negotiated during annexation. And that just means like whenever a certain country takes over another territory. State level autonomy. So the U.S. has a patchwork of MJ laws, which 24 states of Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. have legalized recreational use of as early as 2025, despite federal prohibition. If Canada became a state, it could theoretically retain its progressive stance as a state policy, much like Colorado or California. However, this would depend on the terms of its integration. And there's as many people in California as Canada. Congress might allow Canada to keep its existing laws under a grandfather clause or states' rights framework, especially given its established MJ industry and public support. Around 68% of Canadians support legalization in recent polls. Political influence. Canada's population, about 40 million, would make it the most populous U.S. state, dwarfing California, 39 million, but not too far off. It's largely liberal-leaning electorate, and that's what Canada, it was the Liberals who legalized MJ in Canada. And this is evidenced by support for parties like the Liberals and NDP. Gets a little political here, so we won't go too much into that. But we'll go through a little bit quicker here. Economic and industry impacts. So Canada's MJ market, valued at over 8 billion CAD in 2024, is a mature industry with companies like Canopy Growth and Tilray. As a state, it could integrate into the U.S. market, but federal illegality would complicate interstate commerce. And that's something too, like how would that affect their NASDAQ listing, right? Like there's so much that would come of this, but who knows, by then, maybe we get some sort of safe harbor. Maybe we get uplisting to the NYSE and the NASDAQ for these MSOs. But again, this is just all for fun, right? And let me know your thoughts and opinions. Do you think that this is going to happen? Do you think there's even a remote, slight chance that Canada becomes a U.S. state? I really don't think so, but crazier things have happened. And like I said, when I was making this video, we were talking about it in the Powder private community. It would just be fun to hear all the comments and everybody's opinions and thoughts on this. But businesses might face raids or sanctions, as seen in some U.S. states, unless Congress acted swiftly to reconcile the laws. Alternatively, Canada's economic clout could pressure the U.S. to legalize federally to harmonize trade and taxation, potentially generating billions in revenue. And what is the new administration like? They want to create jobs, cut needless spending, and they want to decrease taxation. Right. So this would be right in line with what's going on right now in the U.S. Cultural clash and enforcement. Culturally, Canada's relaxed attitude towards MJ, which dispensaries in with dispensaries in every major city, in Edmonton, Alberta, here where I reside, there's more MJ shops than there are convenience stores. Like it's insane. Contrast with stricter U.S. regions, enforcement could become a flashpoint. Federal agencies like the DA might crack down in state Canada, clashing the local norms. Public backlash could mirror the resistance seen in the U.S. states like Oregon, where federal overreach has been politically toxic. The likely outcome. The most plausible scenario is a hybrid approach. Canada might retain de facto legalization as a state, leveraging its size and influence to push for federal reform. Wouldn't that be awesome? While navigating temporary legal gray zones. Historical precedent like alcohol prohibition ending in 1933 suggests economic and social momentum could eventually force federal legalization, possibly within a decade of annexation. Until then, MJ would exist in tense limbo, subject to political negotiation and judicial rulings. This hinges on the hypothetical terms of Canada's entry, whether it's voluntarily merger or forced annexation, or a unique deal, in the U.S. political climate in 2025. What do you think? Would Canada fight to keep its MJ culture or fold under federal pressure? And what do you think? Do you think that there's any chance that we see Canada become the 51st state in the U.S.? Like I said, I'm not holding my breath. I don't think this is the most likely scenario, but yeah, in terms of growth, in terms of the prohibition, I do think that we're going to see some sort of reform in the U.S. I think we're going to see banking rescheduling at the bare minimum over the next year or two, and then after that, I think they will attempt to deschedule. And like I said, the pro common sense is the rescheduling aspect, right? The follow the science. Has no business being on there with heroin, right? That's just common sense, and follow the science. And then pro business would be banking, right? Giving financial inclusivity to these companies, and then continuing the United States as the major capital of the world, right? An economic superpower. And then pro the American people would be to deschedule it and federally legalize it, right? And if you haven't seen my video from yesterday, I posted a video on the .com growth versus MJ growth. I'm still getting comments on this video and on X. People are like, oh my God, you can't compare these two. Okay, so again, I'm not comparing the illicit market versus the tech companies. Did they have an illicit market? That's not what I was comparing. I wasn't comparing illicit. All I'm saying is the growth curve. And one could argue that an illicit market in the MJ industry is just even more growth ahead, right? Once it starts to dwarf the illicit market, that's even more growth, right? When the US starts to legalize it, that's even more growth. So, it just goes to my argument that we're maybe even earlier in the growth curve than initially thought, right? So it's just kind of funny to see people say that you can't compare these two. You can compare growth on any asset in the planet, any asset known to man, right? Any asset on the planet has a growth curve and an adoption rate, right? So early adopters, right? Critical mass. So, and the late bloomers. So you can always compare a company to a different company in terms of their growth, in terms of products and services and all the other underlying, aspects. Well, maybe not, but everything has a growth curve, and it makes sense to compare, the early days of the internet and tech stocks to the growth of the MJ industry. Obviously, we're not going to be, the same level playing field, or it's not even going to be in the same ballpark, right? It's going to be trillions of dollars versus billions of dollars, right? There'll be no comparison in terms of market cap and valuation. But in terms of growth ahead, percentage wise, right, there's still so much growth ahead for MJ, right? Like Singapore still offers the death penalty for simple possession, right? So that just tells you that we're only in the pregame warm-ups here in terms of the growth curve for MJ. But check out that video. Like I said, I just wanted to make this video not for the sake of getting political or saying that I think that it was going to happen. I just kind of more or less just wanted to come on and get everybody else's thoughts. Do you think this is something that could potentially come to fruition at some point? I really don't think so. But if it did, like I said, it would more than likely just be it would just operate as a state, right? Just like I said, just like California or Oregon. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on this. We'll continue the conversation in the comment section below. It's Rod with Pow Group. Hope you have a great night, and we'll see you again on the next video.